Hi everybody, this is Rich. It's Tuesday night in Phoenixville, and here we have another special edition of Cheap Red Wine. And we're still working on the bottle of Rex Goliath Cabernet Sauvignon. You'll know it by the rooster on the label. So, here we go. Tonight on Cheap Red Wine, our special executive producer is named Brian Blatz. Brian is a friend of mine from Michigan, and he is the director of the board for capturing photographic images of Detroit's grand architectural heritage, which he does very well. I can assure you of that from the pictures I've seen on his website. I also think that if I were ever to visit the Detroit area, I would love to have Brian be my tour guide because he really seems to know what he's talking about when it comes to the Detroit general area. Brian had a great idea for a cheap red wine. Such a good idea, in fact, that I think I'm going to take his idea and run with it over the course of several episodes. And in a way, his idea is very basic. He said, why not do an episode called Record Collecting 101? The basics of record collecting. And I think that's a great idea, and it's one I can't possibly hope to cover in one little episode of Cheap Red Wine. So, I have a couple ideas already of how I want to go with this. And tonight I'm going to present one of those ideas and tell you a little bit of my philosophy, if you will, on record collecting. I think everybody collects things anyone who collects things collects them for various reasons. You know, a lot of people are just hoping to make the big eBay score. You know, find the stuff that's worth a lot of money and sell it for big bucks. Can't say that I'm one of those people. Most of the records that I've compiled over the last 35 years, and there's some of them back there, don't really have a lot of monetary value per se. But they have a lot of what I would consider to be cultural value, and that kind of hits at the heart of what record collecting means to me. I think a record collector, especially if you're collecting other people's old records, which is what I do, you're taking something out of its former context, that is, someone else's record collection, and you're transferring it, you're giving it a new context, your own record collection. And what that means is, you know, the record that you pick up at the Goodwill store for $0.25 or at the Princeton Record Exchange for $1, you know, used to live somewhere with a bunch of other records, and now it lives somewhere else with a whole new set of records. And depending on what those records are, the subject matter and the music, well, the music doesn't change, but depending on the records in the new record collection, the context of that particular record might change. Hopefully I can demonstrate this over time as I talk about different ideas for Record Collecting 101. But I will say one source of inspiration in doing this comes from a book called Apocalypse Jukebox. Now I'm going to be talking about this more in a separate episode over the next night or two. This is written by a friend of mine, Ed Whitelock, with his friend and co-writer David Jansen. And I'll be talking about it more in a couple of days, but in this book they talk about Harry Smith, who was the compiler of the Folkways Records 1952 6-LP collection, Anthology of American Folk Music, which has proven to be a very influential collection of folk music. It's gone on to influence people like Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen and practically anything that's come since it was released in the 1950s. And what I like about him, from what I've read, is that Harry Smith basically was a record collector who took all these records that he enjoyed, found interesting, put them all together in his own collection. And like I said, he recontextualized them, gave them a new context, and kind of started a little mini revolution in a way, because the albums have proven to be so influential over time. I find that really intriguing. And on some, I guess, far less grandiose level, or maybe I am being grandiose about it, but on some level, I would like to be able to do the same thing with my record collection. So, just to give you one example tonight of something that I've collected, and I don't know, hopefully given a home to, given a new context to, is this little album right here. This dates back to 1954, and up here we see the name Alice M. Blair and her address. She lived in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, and the date down here says 12/25/54. This was given to her probably for Christmas. And here is a list of song titles and artists, and right here she writes "See Back." And back here, on the back, are the rest of the song titles. Everything on this part on the front she added on that Christmas Day in 1954. These were added over the next 3 or 4 years. The last entry is in November of 1958. So she would buy the records and add them to her album, and very carefully write in the names, the titles, and the artists that recorded the songs. I don't remember even where I got this. Some flea market or something. Not all the records that she has listed are here, and one record that's not listed is here, the DeCastro sisters. But you've got Nat King Cole, and you've got K-Star, and Joni James, Kitty Callan, another Joni James, and Frankie Lane. So this was the record collection of Alice M. Blair back in the 1950s. And I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm listening to it back in the background right now. Last night I digitized all these. I put all these records onto a CD together, the way that perhaps Alice Blair listened to them in the 1950s. Obviously she didn't have a CD player, but she had a record player, and she probably liked to stack these records up and play them in some kind of order that she devised. And who knows who Alice M. Blair was? She might have been a teenage girl, just getting into pop music for the first time. Maybe she was a young bride who's maybe her husband gave her this little album for Christmas that year. Who knows? Maybe they would play these records, the husband and the wife, Alice M. Blair and her husband. Maybe they'd play these records and dance in their living room to them on nice evenings back in the 1950s. I don't know. I don't know who Alice M. Blair was, but I know that I am now the caretaker of part of her life. This little container of records was part of somebody else's life, and I know the name of that person. And I feel like it's sort of my, I don't know if duty is the word, but in a way I feel like it's my responsibility to preserve this part of Alice M. Blair's life, because I would like to think that this was a beautiful or fun part of her life. I mean, playing records. Who doesn't love playing records? I mean, I know I do. And I like to think that Alice M. Blair did too. And because of that, this has become part of my collection, along with a lot of other things, bits and pieces of other people's lives. And that's one of the reasons that I collect records. So, I think that's it. I think I've said what I wanted to say for now. I want to thank Brian Blatz again for being an executive producer, a great executive producer, along with the other ones that have helped out so far. Thank him for his donation to Relay for Life, which is coming up this Friday. And I'd like to thank and raise a glass of cheap red wine to Alice M. Blair for wonderful taste in music, and in hopes that she, wherever she is, wherever she was, in hopes that she had a wonderful life. Thanks for your support.